Welcome once again to another episode of Working with Gen Z. Friends, we looked at our very first episode of this year, examining the various tech layoffs that have been making news around the world, especially in the US. Lots and lots of companies laying off people. The number is growing by the day. We saw about 100,000 making just in January and close to 100,000 in November, December. And the corollary to that was to say that if you are the unfortunate one or part of a layoff like that, what does it mean to you financially? And so we examined in that episode the relationship of Gen Z and money. I know that in the Indian context, we have several tech companies who've actually laid off very young professionals, and certainly has a toll on that. Now, today in our episode, we want to we've actually done many episodes examining the various different relationships of the dimensions of Gen Z, right? So there's technology, spirituality, all the different aspects of them as consumer. But when we look around, can we make a case? Is there a case to say that perhaps this generation is seeing more volatility than any other generation, right? We've seen the unfortunate earthquake happening recently, as well as just all the sheer amount of news happening, right from the pandemic to fake news movement, the Me Too movement, the energy crisis, the climate crisis. I remember watching a video of Simon Sinek recently where he says that perhaps there was a time where people used to go to church to find their purpose, used to go to the community bowling leagues to meet the community. They used to meet their neighbors, but over the years, the church attendance is going down, and the bowling leagues are becoming emptier, and we're not talking to our neighbors anymore. And so perhaps the context in which these young generations are experiencing life is fundamentally different. So we're going to try and take a bird's eye view of this entire context in which this generation has grown up, and go beneath and just see that, what does it mean to a young person growing in this context? And to help us do that is my guest, Tess Brigham. Tess, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So as we do with all our episodes, I want to quickly let our viewers know brief background about our guest today and all the things that Tess will be able to highlight for us. So I'm going to take a quick minute to highlight and talk about Tess. Tess has been dubbed as the Millennial Therapist by CNBC as an expert psychotherapist, certified coach, public speaker, and author. Her new book, The True You, a step-by-step guide to conquering your quarter-life crisis, is designed to help young adults manage the highs and lows, the 20-something years and beyond. This book will help you discover unique path so that you can go out in the world and make an impact. She's based out of San Francisco and has over 15 years of experience helping thousands of people find their purpose, develop confidence, and create a life that they're excited about. She's a regular contributor both to CNBC, has featured on TV show The Doctors to discuss the millennial mental health crisis. In addition, she has been featured in the Oprah magazine, the New York Times, San Francisco Chronicle, HuffPost, BuzzFeed, Newsweek, and more. So great pleasure and thank you. And we've been trying to get the dates, so thank you for coming and looking forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too.
Lovely. So Tess, before we go further on my questions about Gen Z and just the prelude, the context I was setting, tell us a little more just for our viewers is what do you do? I've given a brief introduction.
What else do I do? Yeah, I mean, I'm all of those things. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a coach. I speak at companies. I speak for large organizations. I recently wrote a book. And the book is very much about been working with people for over 15 years, but the last 10 I've really dedicated to working with young people. I mean, that's the bulk of the people that I work with. And at first they were millennials, and millennials now are getting older. And now we have this new generation, Generation Z. And so these are the people that are showing up now, and I'm getting to see, and it's been really interesting to see this generation, right, get into the workforce and these first few years of surviving the adulthood. So the book is very much this culmination of everything that I've learned, the core. There are, we talk a lot about generations, right? This is Generation Z, this is a millennial, this is this person, this is that person. But at the core, right, we all want the same things. We all, the drives and what we want to feel confident, we want to feel secure, we don't want to be anxious, we want to manage, right? Like we want to have purpose and meaning in our life. Like that's a through line. And so I take the most common ones that young adults struggle with, and I sort of mix it through my own story of my own quarter life crisis many, many, many years ago. And along with the world that we live in today, because I think that's what makes the generations, right? It's these circumstances of our lives. It's the technology and the internet. It's the pandemic. It's all of these big things that have been happening that make up, right, the drives and motivations of this young generation.
Yeah. Excellent. So Tess, let's get to it. I think you've piqued the curiosity now even more. Let's go right to first just on the title itself, the quarter life crisis. Now, obviously, the work that you've done, as you mentioned, was at once upon a time, perhaps for the millennial generation, and maybe you're still helping the millennial generation, but as we graduate, or you think about the next generation, which is the Gen Z, tell us for our viewers first, like when you say the quarter life crisis, how has it come about, and especially in the context of Gen Z, and do you sense that this crisis that you describe, what it is? Let's first understand, and then how much of it is relevant or applicable to the Gen Z generation?
Yeah. So just to start up, like people make fun of, right? We used to make fun of midlife crises, people having these midlife crises. And, the term quarter life crisis has been around for a while. I mean, I remember in my 20s hearing about it. So I'm not that old, but it's been around for a while. And, I remember watching an Oprah and she talked about it many, many years ago. So basically a quarter life crisis, and it doesn't have to happen exactly at 25. That is, one of the myths. But it's really an identity crisis. It's when how you saw yourself, what you thought you were as a person doesn't match your reality, doesn't match, the person that you're becoming. It's an existential crisis. And I know that when we hear the word crisis, we tend to think like, oh my gosh, it's a crisis. And it's like, well, again, a lot of times people feel like their whole lives have to be falling apart to sort of be going through a quarter life crisis or a midlife crisis. Like, it's not necessarily that your whole life is falling apart. It's really when you get to this very existential place of, I thought I wanted all of these things, and now I don't want these things. I thought I was this kind of person, but I don't really feel like this kind of person, and I don't know who to become. I don't know what's next for me. And that's, can be very, very scary to wake up every day and feel like I'm so disconnected from what I really wanted and what's really important to me. And so the quarter life crisis really comes about. What's unique about that versus a midlife crisis is the quarter life crisis is, we have to make a lot of choices and decisions about our lives very young. I think way too young. Which is, at 17, 18, 19, you have to pick a college major. You have to decide if you're going to go to college. Then you have to decide, what your major is. And then, there's this expectation of whatever your major is when you graduate, I need to get a job in this field. And then I need to build and build and build. And that's what I need to do. And what happens is that when we're dreaming in our bedrooms at night in high school, right, about our future and what it looks like, we forget that it's a dream. It's what's in our minds. So when we dream it and we think it like, oh, I'm going to become this, I'm going to work in finance, and I'm going to make a bunch of money, and I'm going to love it, and it's going to be great, and my life's going to be fabulous. And it's really easy to say, I want to do finance, and then get a job in finance and be like, I hate this. This is awful. Like, yeah, the money might be good and I might be able to afford certain things, but I never pictured myself getting up every day and going to this job that I absolutely hate. That's like soul sucking. But what happens is that then for some people, they're able to sort of realize that early and pivot. and move to something else, or they kind of keep doubling down, right? Like, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to keep going. And then the crisis happens when you're like, oh, I've put all this time and energy into this one thing, I can't leave now, but I don't quite know where my identity is. That's one version that happens for people. And another one is that for some people who really never knew what they wanted to do, and they just kind of picked a random major, and then they just kind of got a job, and they're going from like job to job to job to job, and they're feeling like, what's my place in the world? What's happening? So I see a lot more of these crises at 26, 27, 28 than exactly 25. And what I think is so interesting about the Gen Z generation is what we're seeing is, right, we have the real, there are millennials now that are over 40, right? And there are other millennials, right? The if you go right by the dates that we've assigned everybody, there are also millennials that are about, or what we call Zennials, right? Which is this combination of people that are in like 25 and above now. But so we have this Gen Z generation that is entering into the workforce, and they've entered into the workforce during a global pandemic. They, a lot of them, either their high school was, they didn't have sort of the traditional high school. They weren't, all of these milestones that we talk about and we look forward to for many of these people that are entering into the workforce now have been, they didn't have a college graduation. They've entered work with like remotely, this is their only introduction to work. And so what I think is so important is, I'm a big proponent of awareness. Like, everyone has said, well, why do we need to know these things? Like, why is this important? And it's important because for this generation that's entering the workforce, for the generation, and also for the people that hire the generation, to be aware that this is, this identity crisis does happen, and that the role of your 20-something years is you're doing a lot. You're trying to figure out who you are and what you want, and you're simultaneously trying to figure out, like, what's your career, where do I want to live, what's my love life look like, what does all that mean? And they each inform each other. So you're constantly like, tweaking the recipe. And a lot of times employers see, Gen Zers coming into the workforce, and they're seeing them now. And it's really important for them to understand developmentally, not only what they're going through at this age, but developmentally what they're going through because of everything that's happened in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny you're talking about something which a conversation I'm having with my own son. We're talking about going to the college, and we were just having this debate. He's studying supply chain, and he's like, Dad, I want to do a master's in supply chain. And I'm telling him, like, maybe this is not a good idea to do another degree. And he's like, no, that's just what I want to do, because I know I want to be a deep expert. And I keep telling him that today, no one kind of sticks to the career that they have chosen, right? So you're going to like something else, but he he doesn't see it that way.
How old is he?
He's 19.
Okay, so he's in college now.
Yeah, he's 19. Yeah, so he's the first year of college, and therefore kind of a discovery phase. Now, Tess, you worked with lots of young adults or people in this age bracket. Like, can you think of a kind of an example or a story, or do you have someone where you could say that, hey, there was this, like, almost like the crisis? And I really was intrigued when you said that this is not necessarily 25, but perhaps 26, 27, or even 28, right? And was there someone that that, okay, you know what, this was someone who was like a straight A student, was a valedictorian or whatever, right? And perhaps the path would have been just the way he or she would expected, and here
and I see that a lot. I think that and that's what, when millennials started showing up, that's what really hit me when they first came, was the fact that, wow, they were feeling like, I did everything right, I did everything everyone told me. And that I think is so much of this. Again, I think it's about parents and educators and bosses and such, like for so long, millennials were told, if you hit all these milestones, if you work hard in high school and get into a good college, if you get into a good college and work really hard and do a bunch of internships, and then you'll get a job and then you'll be happy, right? Like that was sort of this, whether parents said that directly or not, that was the message for millennials for a long, long time. So for them to hit these crisis points, right, to hit these places of, but I did everything right, and you told me I would be happy. I had a client who, and I talked about her in my book, about, and I use that example of finance because this was her situation where
Sure.
she very much, had, she wanted to make money. She wanted to be comfortable. That was really important to her. She didn't want to have to worry about money and how am I going to pay for things. And she thought finance was the solution. And she went through, and she now sees, when she looks back, like, oh yeah, I really didn't enjoy it as much as I thought in college. Like I think I was kind of fooling myself. And she started out and she knew instantly it wasn't for her, but she kept she kept going and going and going until she hit this crisis point of, I hate this, I'm miserable. Like the idea of getting up in the morning and going to work is, the last thing that I want to do. And that is a very common thing that I see. And what I'm seeing now is, and what I think so interesting about the Gen Z generation is they've been watching, right? They've been watching millennials, because what's interesting about millennials is that they were the first generation where they were in a world when they were young where everyone had a platform to express their opinions. So we have been complaining about the young since the beginning of time, no matter, I don't care how old you are, we've been complaining about youth. But when millennials came about, they were the first generation, and everybody, you just get on Twitter and start talking about how you hate these millennials, and then it spreads and it becomes, part of this narrative in our world that millennials are this, and this. And so this next generation, Generation Z, they've been watching them. They've been watching what's going on. And so they're entering the workforce in a very different state than millennials did, right? Like that kind of attitude of, this is what I'm going to do. If I work hard and achieve it, it will make me happy. They're really flipping things around for themselves and asking the question much more of, what's going to make me happy? Like, what does happiness mean to me? What does meaning and purpose and all of that mean to me? And then how do I make choices and decisions from there?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was John Lennon or someone, there was a quote that I think that said that life is what happens to you when you're busy planning what to do with it, right?
Yes.
But I think unfortunately, perhaps at 24, 25, when those messages are being told to you, you're not going to believe it, or you're
yeah. Well,
So
and it's also, I think the example that you gave of your son is such a good one, which is that he's 19. So it's really easy to want to be like, what are you doing? Why is this? And it's like, I bet you anything 6 months from now, he's going to have a new plan. Right. Or
he's already changed his major once from the second year.
So, but the thing is that we tend to see that as chaos, right? Of like, what are they doing? And they said they wanted this and that. It's like, no, he's figuring it out. He's learning about himself. And that's what's so important. And that's the thing about the quarter life crisis that's so hard, is that you don't quite know who you are. Your brain's not fully formed until you're 25. You think you know who you are at 18, but you don't, because you have so many more experiences that are going to happen to you that are going to change how you see yourself, how you see the world, like how you perceive things. So that's what is a bit challenging for this generation that are entering the workforce right now, is they've entered it at a very strange time with the pandemic and remote work. But the other part of it too is that everybody has to go through a bit, even if it's not necessarily a crisis. Everyone needs to go through a bit of this. Who am I? What do I want? What does it mean? But what I'm seeing so much of with this younger generation is they've been having to do this in such isolation, more than any other generation that I've seen. Like while they're being more mindful of what are my values and what is it that I want in work, they're doing so much of this exploration alone. And so that's incredibly difficult to do.
Absolutely. It's as I was alluding to the video by Simon Sinek, and it's really kind of hits that point. Now, Tess, let's go to, so I think this is good for our viewers to understand, like, look, what the term means. I mean, it's been around, what it kind of means and how it's, more applicable to the Gen Z. Let's now talk through, you say in your book that there are these 6 steps or 6 ways in which you can overcome it. Let's understand what those are. And then perhaps a question that would be is that when you think about this generation, given all what you just said, what role can, all the people who are influencers in their life, so like maybe a teacher or a parent, or or a professor, right, can make to overcome this crisis? It's 2 parts to the question. One is to help.
Yeah. What was the first part?
The first part is saying, help us with those 6 steps. Let's just for that one.
Okay, I can do that. I was like, oh, this is, I don't know if I can retain all this. So yeah, the 6 steps are, and they are, the best way to think about them is that I think when people think about, these are these steps, is they do go in a bit of this order, but they're basically concepts and things that all my clients struggled with. And it really starts with, awareness and managing your emotions, better understanding like how you're thinking, how you're feeling. And the way in which you better understand what you're thinking and feeling is to start to become more mindful and start becoming more aware of what's happening. And so that's what I was seeing a lot with my clients, is they were going by a lot of, well, but my mom told me, but well, this is like that, well, but I'll make more money, but society said, right? Versus how do I feel? What is it that I feel? What is it that I think? So helping people better get a sense of how to understand and manage their emotions. And then it's, once you've gotten there, you can start to really recognize your fear. And fear is such a huge thing that affects us all. We all have to live with anxiety, but this generation, and it's been done, is that they are the most anxiety-ridden generation that we've ever had. And again, we are seeing that a lot of this is because of the internet and smartphones and social media and all of these other things. And then it's about, you've looked at yourself. And so it's then about looking about, out into the world and at other people. Like, how do you not take things personally? How do you not, get overwhelmed by things like that? How do you, recognize that most interactions aren't really about you, it's about the other person and how they see things. And then I get into fear of failure and not stopping yourself from doing the things that you want to do. And then the last steps are really around this combination of values and understanding your values, because you have to know what you value. It doesn't mean it can't ever change, because values will change over time, like circumstances and such. But what are your core values? What's really important to you? How do you want to live your life? And then making decisions based on that. Right. And so that's the final part is, it's understanding yourself and your emotions and what motivates you, and then understanding your values, and then finally going in and making decisions. How do you make decisions that align with your values? So, you can take any of the steps away or move them around, but what I found is there's this natural evolution to this place. And a lot of times clients come and they have these decisions they need to make, right? They're way on the other side. And that part's really hard, is that you do have to, like, in order to make decisions that you feel really good about, you do have to do this other work around how you are thinking and feeling, and how and how you're seeing the world, and your mindset around, the choices that you're making.
So very nice. Yeah, it's just to understand the various points that you mentioned about, fear of failure, understanding your emotions, self-awareness, and, your values and so on. And these are all points that I'm sure, like, if we want, we can spend so much more time
Yes.
feel some of those. But Tess, what is your I mean, what guidance or what would you say to the young Gen Z? I have again two parts to this set of
Hmm.
question. One is that, okay, let's say that, you've outlined the quarter life crisis, you talked about kind of the steps, but if I'm a boss, if I'm trying to recruit this young person, right, I also have a deliverable or a responsibility to extract work out of
Hmm.
you, and therefore I'm dealing with someone who's somewhat in a discovery phase of their life, right? What do I do? Because we've heard people, I mean, we've heard things like, the quiet quitting and the resignation and all
Hmm.
kind of stuff, where, I think people are reevaluating, the equation of work. But
Hmm.
boss, right? And I have to deal with, in a lot of industries, a lot of verticals, a lot of companies, depend on a lot of young people up front, right? So I'm just curious, like, any thoughts on, from the company's perspective, how do I
Hmm.
handle these young folks who are coming into my workplace? They have a lot of potential, but they're still not
Hmm.
mature, or they're in that journey.
Yeah. Well, it really starts with, I mean, and this is the part that's hard is a leader's superpower is empathy, right? So it does start with the leader being able to say, okay, I need to hire a lot of young people, or my business has a lot of young people. And first letting go of what you think how this generation should be and how they should feel and what they're going through, and being able to approach it from this place and this understanding of, okay, these people are young, they're just starting out, they've graduated during, a pandemic, they don't have a lot of experience in the workforce, and they really don't have a lot of experience working inside an office because a lot of them have been working remotely. And because I think that what happens a lot is leaders and managers come at it from a place of how they were at 22. Well, I was like this at 22, or the world was like this when I was 22. And I see that over and over again with leaders and managers, where they really think about it based on their experiences. And that's why empathy is so important. It's like letting go of your perception of how you think things should be, or what's important, and really putting yourself in the shoes of your young people, and recognizing that young people are always, there is a little bit of like finding themselves, and that people get so mad and frustrated because they feel like, I just hired someone and a year later they left. It's like, well, this is, when you hire people that, like, this is where they're at in their lives. And so I really feel like, managers need to recognize that you really have a choice. What I see a lot of today is that managers come in, they have a perception of how you should be when you're young. They have a lot of, they've jumped to a lot of conclusions, right? They don't know that this is a new generation. They probably don't know it's a new generation. They think it's still those millennials that are entitled and lazy from before. And they automatically start going into this place of, I can't hire anyone. No one wants to stay. They are, they're all over the place. But the thing is, what I hear from my clients and what I've read and seen over and over again is Gen Z wants to stay at this job. Gen Z wants to make this work. They don't want to hop around all over the place. They are, like I said earlier, they're more anxiety prone. They don't have this great desire to experience everything. But what needs to happen in the workforce is that what Gen Z really wants is they want purpose and meaning. They want purpose and meaning in their lives, and they want companies that are going to promote diversity. And I'm sure you've talked about this on the podcast, like diversity and inclusion, and wanting something that's valued based and mission driven. And they want you to walk the walk, talk the talk. So the leader's role is to, instead of seeing these as these young people that aren't, working as hard as you did or as hard as you want them to, right? Is to be able to see them at this point in their lives with everything that's gone on in the world. How do I help them, right, find that meaning? How do I help them figure out for themselves, what they want to do? And really, it would be with this idea of, if you can build that relationship and you can help someone figure out what it is that they want, it doesn't necessarily mean leaving your company. Because I think I get this a lot, where when they bring in coaches or they bring in someone, I get this side comment from people a lot, which is like, yeah, I guess I'm kind of worried if you come in, then you're gonna get everyone to quit. Right? Like, you're gonna like tell them to do that. And it's like, that's not what it is. I think that it's so much of it is this mindset of, oh, we got to hire a bunch of young people and I just got to they can't quit, they can't quit, they can't quit. Yeah. Versus taking that away and really thinking about it of, I'm hiring these young people, some will stay, some will go. How do I make their experience here feel like they're getting that kind of meaning and purpose and attention that they're really looking for, with the idea of that if you can do that, then you will definitely retain people longer than they really, most likely they might have quit, but you're going to retain them for longer than you thought. Those that are going to leave no matter what. But you've then got a lot of people who maybe there's something else in your organization that's right for them. Maybe these tweaks need to be made that is a good path for them. And you will retain much more of that initial group of people if you put yourself in that frame or that mindset, versus the other mindset. The other thing too is, and this is a bit of a byproduct, is, this generation they're very social media savvy. They are going on TikTok and this and that, talking about companies, talking about experiences. And, I really do think that if you are respectful and honest and care about the employee and we're willing to work with them and talk to them and have these career conversations and help them with the meeting and all of that other kind of stuff, even if they leave, they're not going to be going on social media to badmouth you. They're going to say very kind things about you. Yeah. And I think that's also important too, is what companies don't understand is you're building this reputation and everybody's hearing it. Like, I know so much about so many companies because I've talked to so many people all over the world about various companies, and they've told me the nitty gritty. And it's a little bit like, imagine if your company is known as this awesome place for young people that have transformed them to this other place. That will only help your company and only reinforce what Gen Z really wants, which is values and mission driven and all of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think the easiest way in today's day and time is when you think about a source or a site like Glassdoor, right? I mean, that Glassdoor tells you just how people experience what they see. If it's good, they tell the good. If it's not good, they tell the bad. Now, my one question, Tess, given that you have worked with so many young people and millennials and the Gen Z, what advice? Like, let's flip this around. Obviously, you outline all the things that company, a boss, the culture can play, all of that. What advice would you give to the Gen Zs coming into the workforce, right? I mean, is there anything on their part? I mean,
oh yeah,
yeah. So let's hear that. I like to. I mean, I think that would be a real value to perhaps the recruiting guys.
Yeah.
But just even for the Gen Zs to say that you can't clap unless you have two hands, right? And so it's not just the boss who has to do everything, right? What can they do?
Yeah. And I think this is one thing when I speak to older generations about this, that there's always this feeling of, what about them? What are they going to do? And I'm a firm believer that it's not just all about the organizations. It's a two-way street. It's like any relationship in life. Both people have to participate. But I think that for Gen Zers who are coming in, the advice that I give them is that, careers are long. Because the world that we live in today, where everything is so instant, there's such this idea of, well, I need to be promoted right away. I need to be doing this. I need to be doing that. And it's like, no, 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 like it doesn't work like that. And I really get them to see that, right, that the whole 10,000 hours to become a master at something. I mean, that is, if you
They don't
look
buy
at
it.
anything, it is so true, right? You
Yes.
cannot get away from that it really takes, that they may have this perception of, well, I understand this job. And I'm like, you understand it, but you don't have the deep understanding of it. There's layers and layers and layers that you've gotten to. So managing their expectations around like what it's going to look like, what work's supposed to be. I really urge them to think about, not sort of this idea of following your bliss, but following and focusing on what is meaningful and engaging to you, what would be important to you, and making choices and decisions based on that. And then the other part of it is, I hear this a lot from people where they'll say, I'm so unhappy. I don't know what's going on. I feel lost. And it's like, talk to your manager, talk to somebody. Like a lot of times people are coming to, they're telling me all of these things. And I'm like, I can't fix these things for you. I can help you, but you need to go and have conversations with your manager and ask for what you need. Ask for, like, I need more mentorship. I need this. I need that. I'm interested in this. Can we have career conversations? Like, do you have time for that? I also urge them to look around the company and people that you think that who are a couple years ahead of you, 5 years ahead of you, that you're like, you really admire and like, buy them a cup of coffee, like talk to them, ask them if they, have time to hear from you. Do that. People assume like mentors are just going to show up. It's like, no, go and meet people, figure out, like, instead of sort of looking at everything from this place of, all right, I'm really unhappy here and I don't like this, maybe I should leave, of really figuring out, like, do I need to shift and change my mindset around work? Like, what do I need to do? What kind of attitude do I need to have when I show up every day? Am I stonewalling and closing things off and not being, open and fair about these things too? And the other thing is, with bosses and managers, what's so hard is, and I'm sure some manager out there is like pulling their hair out because they're like, I have no time to do anything. I'm supposed to help people find their meaning in life. Are you kidding me? And that's the part that's really hard as a manager, is that, it's so important to hone those people skills and to, to make sure that people are being seen and heard. But I'm like, your manager's human. They've got so much going on. It's not that they don't care. It's just they've got so much happening. And to try to understand that and try to figure out, like, okay, it's hard to get on their calendar. So what are some other ideas? Like, how else do I, build a bond, a relationship with them? Because Gen Z is much more about building those relationships, like those more of those connections and personal relationships, not in the sense of like they want to get up in everyone's business or they want everyone to know their business, but much more of the, hey, what did you do this weekend? How are your kids? What's going on? Like that kind of relationship, that friendlier relationship. So it's on, on each individual, what I would say, and it's the same thing I say to when I work with couples, which is like, don't worry about what the other person's doing. Don't worry about them. Worry about what you're doing. Focus on you. What is within your control? What can you do differently? And if both parties, the Gen Zers and the bosses, managers, HR, whomever it is, if each person can say, okay, I'm going to worry about me, what's within my control, what I can do, then magical things will happen. And I've seen it time and again. And the other thing that happens that is really unusual is that, sorry, we have these people in our yard now and it's very distracting. Can you hear that?
I can see the glare in the back. So
yeah, they're putting giant. Sorry, my neighbor has this huge tree and it runs into our place and I'm in my shed in the back, and I knew they were coming today. I didn't think they were going to come at like 8:30 in the morning, so I'm sorry.
No worries, go ahead.
I can't even remember my train of thought, but it's so.
We're talking about the connection of Gen Z and the bosses, right?
So it's
together, yeah.
Yeah, and what I've seen over the years, whether it's a couple or a boss and their employee, is that if you focus on you and focus on what's within your control, it instantly lowers your anxiety, because anxiety is about control or the lack of control, right? And so we get anxious when things are happening and it's out of our control. It's out of our control. So what's so important about that is when you really focus on what's within your control, that will lower your anxiety. It will help you tremendously. And it really will, over time, what I've seen is that one person, even if one person's doing all the work, it changes the dynamic in the relationship, right? Because suddenly a new kind of person is showing up to work. Suddenly a new kind of manager is showing up. Yeah. And that's what's really powerful.
So, Tess, you obviously worked with millennials for a good chunk, and now Gen Zs now. How do we help, or how does the story become, in your experience, right, from the first quarter life crisis to what happens in the second quarter? Does the story get better? And in other words, if I am a Gen Z, how what evidence do you see as they go beyond 25 or 26, 27, and up in their life by age? Uh, uh, does it become better, or how do we help them to sustain it? Or if you sense that, because there's so much distraction and so many things happening, right? So what have you found?
Yeah, I think that, it's really important now for Gen Zers to start to think about what it is that they want, what's meaningful for them. And so what I'm always recommending to my clients is turn off social media, or really limit social media. Social media is one of the biggest things that affects young people in terms of, I'm unhappy at work, go on Instagram, go on TikTok, watch videos, do this, do that. And that really, those expectations, they influence them, right? Like it really, and so I'm always saying, like, you have to focus on what you want, like you, nobody else. And there's also the pressures of your family and what they're saying to you. And my dad's telling me this, and my mom's telling me that, what their friends are saying. And what's really important for young people is to turn off all of that. I call it like the outside noise. You've got to turn off the outside noise, because what happens for young people is there's all this outside noise, and then that produces all this inside noise of like, what am I doing? Blah, 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 blah. And what people tend to do is they focus on, I got to manage my inside, blah, 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 blah. I got to do this. I got to, I've got to focus on all this stuff, and I got to think about all these things. And it's like, no, shut all that off, focus on what it is that you want, and it will help you make better decisions. Because what happens a lot is people, especially young people, they make a lot of decisions based on the outside noise, what my family wants, what my friends want, what social media tells me I should want, versus what they really need to do. And the other one too is that it's just about being really mindful about, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's going on with me? What's happening? And using that. It doesn't mean that you have to make a bunch of changes like the minute you're like, I'm unhappy at work, I need to leave. Like, it's like, no, so what's going on here, right? Yeah. Like, why are you unhappy? What's happening? What's going on? And the more that you can do this when you're young, the more that you can learn how to say, oh, I'm on social media too much. Like, I need to give it a little bit of break and real focus in. The more that you can say, I don't really like that. Or I wasn't very inspired today. Why is that? Or I felt energized today. Why is that, right? The more that you can do this, not only will it make you feel, for this generation, it will make them feel more secure and safe in what they're doing. It will absolutely, make the 25, 26, 27, like these years much better. When I started all of this, my mission, and it still is, has always been that imagine if young adults could gain the confidence, the clarity, the strategies, the help that they needed when they were young. Imagine what they could do at 30, 40, 50. But what usually happens is that there's so much angst and running around that it takes a while for people to unravel all of these things. And then they finally feel like, oh, I'm 35 or I'm 40 and I'm finally coming into my own.
Yeah.
And and it's a combination of that and the fact that, our world is radically different than it once was. And people have to really be mindful of that. While in your 20s, you may not have thought that or done that, but you didn't have social media, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have the world that we live in today. You didn't go through a pandemic.
Absolutely. And you bring up such a good point. My goodness, I really hope everybody out there listens and takes this advice, detoxing from social media. But I want to know from you, Tess, do you have a story? I mean, can you think of someone? Obviously, it's easier said than done. I mean, social media is here to stay.
Mhm.
Everybody's experiencing, sort of the ill effect, if you can call it that, or the downside. Because if you're not on it, people say, "Hey, how do you know what's happening in the world?" But then there's too much of it, right? And I see that with my son as well, where he's given up Instagram and he's like, I can think clearly, and my goodness,
Mhm.
what a waste of time it was for me to. I mean, he's deleted it from his app, from his
Yeah.
and and so on. So in your client work, I mean, do you know of a young person and were they able to kind of overcome this and if so, what kind of difference did it make?
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of a client that I have. I'm going to call her Jane. So Jane very much was, she came to me because she was at this point in her life where she wasn't quite sure, I'm not happy in my work. I don't know what I want. I did everything right. Like I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, but, I'm in this job. And the biggest thing was that, because again, I come back to this, is that Gen Z is a very small sliver of the workforce. But the thing is that this work, they really started work during the pandemic. I mean, if you really get technical about the dates, so sorry. I'm so sorry. They're on my
Yeah, I
roof
mean,
now. Can you hear that?
yeah, go ahead, please.
Oh, can you hear that though? I'm
No, I
sorry.
cannot.
No.
I don't
Okay,
hear
I'm
anything.
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm making a
Yeah,
lot of
there's
work
no
for your
noise on
editor.
my
I
side.
apologize. Okay, good. They're just shaking my whole roof here. So what was happening for Jane was that she was working at this company. She was, typical sort of what was happening in work from home, end of the Zoom meeting, clicking a button, and now she's alone, in her, makeshift bedroom office situation.
Yeah.
And she was alone with her thoughts. And instead of like being able to think, okay, what is it that why am I struggling right now? Or a lot of the issue that she was having was around the fact that she just wasn't getting that day-to-day help that she needed. We all know when we're starting a job and you need to be sitting next to people and go, how do I do this? Where's this? How do I do that? And for young people, who started during the pandemic, it's like they had none of that. Like literally clicking the button, done. So what was happening was that she was constantly going, instead of looking into herself or thinking about that, she was constantly going to social media and like scrolling, and it made her feel overwhelmed and anxious. And so she had a hard time doing her job, and she got more and more, she felt more and more and more disconnected from
Mm.
her work. And it just went on and on and on until the point where she finally, that's when we started working together. And I really was like, you got to put the phone as far away from you as you can, like shut off the apps, do all of that. And it was, it's obviously hard at first. It's hard to break habits. It is a habit. It is just social media stuff. Getting on social media is it's that same thing as when people will be like, I have a break, I'm going to go smoke a cigarette. Right. That habit. And so it's really helping her break that habit. And if people don't think that it's going to have this impact on you, but eventually she was like, oh, wow, not going on TikTok every 10 minutes, really helped me tremendously, like think clearly and think
Yeah.
through what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I hope people can take inspiration from that story or many such stories, and to really kind of benefit and look inwards, as you say. So Tess, well, as we think about wrapping up, I've got just as a closeout to say that, okay, what would be your sort of final call to action and advice, if I can say it just on two sides of the podium, right? I mean, one would be for the Gen Zs to say, hey, look, we've talked about the quarter life crisis, we've talked about, all the things that you can overcome it and so on. But again, just if you had to sum up to say that, okay, what are some of the do's and don'ts from their perspective? And then again,
Mhm.
on this end, again, more from the professional context of people working with them, right?
Yeah.
Keep that, yeah.
So for the Gen Zers in the workforce, I would say really it's the outside noise. Be really mindful when you have a thought, when you're thinking about something, really ask yourself the question of, is this my idea? Is this what I think I want? Is this based on me, or is this some other idea or something else? And again, it's that if you're in the workforce and you're not happy with what's going on, really think about what's within your control. Like, what is within control that you can change first before you run off and quit your job, And for the flip side, for the managers and the employers and such, it's, really understanding that this is a generation that is not like when you were young, that a lot's happened, that they're affected by the internet and social media, and that they are going to think and do things differently. And that doesn't mean that's a bad thing. They have something to teach you, but you need to empathize, put yourself in their shoes, and really think about not necessarily like, I just need warm bodies to, do the work. If you want to build a company and sustain a company that often brings in young people, then you have to think about, what do young people want, and really identify that for yourself, and start showing up to the best of your ability. It doesn't mean that you have a whole new job. It just means that you need to start thinking about what's within your control, versus what they're doing or not doing.
Yeah. Excellent. So very nice, and lots of simple, good, and effective tips. Just in many ways, I mean, I think the exaggeration that we often have about a generation, and say that they're like this, or we label them, it's at the end of the day, they're still people. And so I think if we can appreciate the context in which they come from, and as you say, being empathetic, being more mindful, it becomes that much more easier for you, and hopefully they can do the same for the people that they have to deal on the other side. So once again, Tess, this has been fabulous, very nice. I would encourage people to go look up the book, and where can they find the details of the book, if they need to know the 6 steps and everything else.
Yeah, well, the book is it's called True You: A Step-by-Step Guide to Conquering a Quarter Life Crisis. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes and Nobles. It's you can go to my website, tessbrigham.com. I have tons of information. The book just came out about a month and a half ago, so depending on when you're listening to this, it depends on how much information is on my website, because it's being, I'm putting it on right now. But if you just go to my website, tessbrigham.com, all of my information, everything is right there. And I have lots of free resources for people, and blogs and other things, and also programs and things that are paid. So lots of good stuff.
Lovely. So I think do check it out, friends, as there is plenty available online, whether it's a site or the book, but there's enough also by way of the YouTube videos that are there, and just to see how you can use some of that to make yourself much easier with the crisis. And I would like, there's enough ammunition to the resources to help you overcome that. But it's been a great conversation, Tess. Thank you very much. I'm sure there's more that we can do, but this has been very good, sort of getting the bird's eye view of appreciating what you've seen, how they can overcome, and what can they do, and just I think being a little more sort of understanding on both sides, really, right, rather than trying to say that this is how they are and this is how the bosses is and so on and so forth. So
Hmm.
thank you very much, Tess. Look forward to doing more together, and take care and all the very best.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Bye.